Foundation Archive. Night Shift. 4 files are cleared for review this session. The light stops here. These are all people. Class of 1975. It wants to talk. Lights low. Playback begins now. Special Containment Procedures. SCP-087 is located on the campus of Redacted. The doorway leading to SCP-087 is constructed of reinforced steel with an electro-release lock mechanism. It has been disguised to resemble a janitorial closet, consistent with the design of the building. The lock mechanism will not release unless, redacted, volts are applied in conjunction with counterclockwise rotation of the key. The inside of the door is lined with industrial foam padding. Due to the results of the final exploration, no personnel are permitted access to SCP-087. Description: SCP-087 is an unlit platform staircase. Stairs descend on a 38-degree angle for 13 steps before reaching a semicircular platform of approximately 3 meters in diameter. Descent direction rotates 180 degrees at each platform. The design of SCP-087 limits subjects to a visual range of approximately 1.5 flights. A light source is required for any subjects exploring SCP-087, as there are no lighting fixtures or windows present. Lighting sources brighter than 75 watts have shown to be ineffective, as SCP-087 seems to absorb excess light. Subjects report, and audio recordings confirm, distressed vocalizations from what is presumed to be a child between the ages of redacted and redacted. The source is estimated to be located approximately 200 meters below the initial platform. However, attempts to descend have failed to bring subjects closer to the source. SCP-087 has undergone 4 recorded explorations. Each subject has encountered SCP-087-1, which appears as a face with no visible pupils, nostrils, or mouth. It is not the source of the pleading. Addendum. Over a period of 2 weeks following Exploration 4, several members of the staff and students from the redacted campus reported knocking at a variable rate of 1 to 2 seconds per knock coming from the interior of SCP-087. The door leading to SCP-087 has been fitted with industrial padding. All reports of knocking have ceased. Authorized personnel may refer to documents 0871 through 0874 for transcripts of Explorations 1 through 4. Data expunged. Document 087I, Exploration I. D8432 is a 43-year-old Caucasian male of average build and appearance and unremarkable psychological background. Class D designation is a result of demotion due to mishandling SCP redacted. D8432 is equipped with a flood lamp, a handheld camcorder fitted with a transmission stream, and an audio headset for communication with Dr. Redacted at control. D8432 steps through the doorway onto the initial platform. Despite the wattage, the flood lamp only illuminates the first 9 steps. The second platform is not visible. D8432. It's fucking dark. Is your flood lamp functioning properly? D8432 shines the light into the academic building's hallway. The light reaches significantly further. D8432. Yeah, it's working. It just won't light these stairs all the way down. Thank you. Please continue. D8432 descends 13 steps to the second platform, a semicircle of apparently concrete surface and walls with no distinct markings. He rotates and pauses. Reason for stopping? D8432. You hear that? There's a fucking kid down there. Sounds like one. None of the described audio is feeding through the camera or mic at this time. Could you please describe the sound? D8432. It's young. It's crying and sobbing and saying, "Please, help, please." Yeah, it keeps repeating that and crying. Can you estimate its distance from your current location? D8432. I don't know. Maybe 200 meters down? Please continue down the next flight. The subject descends another 13 steps. As he reaches the landing, audio of the child as described is picked up. The child alternates between sobbing, wailing, and the words, "Please, help," and "down here." The volume is consistent with the subject's estimate. Can you still hear the crying? D8432. Yeah. We're picking it up as well. Please continue down. Stop if you notice any changes in the audio or environment. The subject descends another 3 flights before stopping. D8432. Keep going? Please. The subject continues a further 17 flights. Each remains 13 steps. No visual changes are noted. D8432. I'm not getting any closer to the kid. Stereo audio confirms the crying has not increased in volume. Descent continues. After 50 flights and 34 minutes elapsed, the volume has still not increased. D8432. I feel a little uneasy. Dr. Redacted. Natural. Please continue. Continued. The subject hesitates before stepping down on the next stair. As the subject moves forward, the flood lamp illuminates a face located approximately at the bottom of the flight, designated SCP-087-1. It appears to be the same size and shape as a human head, except it is lacking a mouth, nostrils, and pupils. The face is completely motionless, but is making direct eye contact, indicating its awareness of D8432. D8432. Fuck. What the fuck is that? Shit. Holy fucking shit. What the fuck? Dr. Redacted. Can you please describe what you see? D8432. It's some sort of fucking person face thing, and it's fucking looking right at me. Fuck, it's looking right at me. Dr. Redacted. Is it moving? D8432. No, it's just staring at me. Fuck, it's creepy. Dr. Redacted. Please approach and further illuminate the entity. D8432. Fuck, I don't want to fucking... The face jerks forward about 50 centimeters directly toward D8432. D8432. Fuck. Redacted. D8432 enters a panicked state and rapidly ascends SCP-087, reaching the ground floor in 18 minutes, at which time he collapses and passes out. There is no sign of SCP-087-1. Review of the footage indicates an equal number of flights and steps ascending as descending. Audio of the crying and pleading remains at the same volume until the last flight, at which point it ceases. Medical reports indicate collapse was a result of the rapid ascension of the stairs, causing fatigue. Document 087-2, Exploration 2. D9035 is a 28-year-old male of strong build. Psychological background indicates no abnormalities except an extreme hatred for women. Subject has a history of violence and a record of data expunged. D9035 is equipped with a flood lamp, a handheld camcorder with transmission stream, an audio headset for communication with Dr. Redacted at control, and a backpack of adhesive LED lights that activate by compression. D9035 shines the flood lamp down the first flight, Despite the extra wattage, the light does not illuminate beyond the 9th step. D9035. You want me to go down there, Doc? Dr. Redacted. Please shine your flood lamp outside of SCP-087 to verify it is functioning properly. The light is confirmed brighter than in Exploration 1. Dr. Redacted. Thank you. Please continue to the first landing. D9035. Hey, Doc. I know what you said and all, but I don't think I want to go there. Dr. Redacted. Please continue to the first landing. D9035. Doc, look, As per our earlier conversation, please continue to the first landing. D9035 pauses, then descends to the first landing and stops. D9035. Is that a kid? Dr. Redacted. Please remove one of the adhesive lights and affix it to the wall on the landing. D9035. Doc, you hear that? Is that a kid down there? Dr. Redacted. That's unconfirmed. Please affix an adhesive light to the wall and verify it functions. D9035 hesitates, then removes one of the lights from his backpack and adheres it to the wall. He presses on the light, and it turns on. Dr. Redacted. Please turn off your flood lamp. D9035 hesitates again before turning off the lamp. The LED light illuminates the landing, but does not extend beyond the first step either way. Dr. Redacted. Thank you. You may turn your flood lamp back on. Please continue to descend. At each landing, affix an LED light to the wall and turn it on. If you notice anything unusual, please report it. D9035 descends the next flight. As he sets foot on the landing, the audio picks up sounds of pleading and crying, consistent with the first exploration. Dr. Redacted. Can you still hear the previously reported audio? D9035. Yeah. She sounds about 150, maybe 200 meters down. Am I supposed to get her? Look, Doc, I don't do good with kids. Dr. Redacted. Please place the light and continue down until you notice anything unusual. The subject continues in this manner for the next 25 flights before stopping. D9035. I don't think I'm getting any closer to the kid, Doc. Dr. Redacted. How far below would you estimate the source of the sound to be? D9035. Same as before. 150 to 200 meters down. Dr. Redacted. Thank you. Please proceed. Subject continues in the same fashion for the next 24 flights. At the 51st landing, the subject stops. Footage shows an arced gouge in the concrete wall, approximately 50 centimeters long and 10 centimeters wide. The first step down from the landing appears smashed into rubble. You see that? Yes. Can you please describe what you see? Looks like something slashed at the wall, and the step over here is all crumbled up and stuff. The slash mark looks really smooth. The subject touches the gouge. Yeah, it's smooth. Feels like glass. Thank you. Please continue down. Look, Doc, I think I've gone far enough. Please continue, as per our agreement. I don't want to be doing this, agreement or not. Data expunged. The subject steps over the destroyed step and continues. After a further 38 flights, the flood lamp illuminates SCP-087-1. The face is staring directly at the subject. Is there a reason you stopped? Unresponsive. Breathing grows labored. SCP-0871 remains immobile for an additional 13 seconds. SCP-0871 blinks. Yelling. Incomprehensible. SCP-0871 jerks forward until it is approximately 90 centimeters from 9035. Subject turns and flees up the stairs. Please relax and calm down. Turn around. We need a closer look at the face. Ignores then continues rapid ascent, screaming incomprehensibly. 9035, can you hear me? Please slow down. 9035 is unresponsive. His screaming diminishes to babbling. After ascending 72 flights, 9035 collapses on the 17th landing. 9035, can you hear me? 9035 is unresponsive. Labored breathing is audible. For 14 minutes, the subject is immobile. Audio picks up only breathing and the continuous pleading from below. A rapid heartbeat, not consistent with a human heartbeat, is recorded, followed by a low, cracking noise. 7 seconds later, 9035 gasps and revives, continuing his ascent wordlessly. He exits SCP-087 and sits on the floor outside the entrance. 9035 then enters a catatonic state from which he has not yet recovered. Document 0873, Exploration 3. Subject D9884 is a 23-year-old female of average build and appearance. Psychological background indicates a history of depression. Subject has a minimal record of using excessive force to. D9884 is equipped with a flood lamp, a handheld camcorder fitted with a transmission stream, and an audio headset for communication with at control. The subject also carries a backpack containing water, nutrient bars, and a thermal blanket. D9884 stands on the ground-level landing of SCP-087. The flood lamp illuminates only the first 9 steps. LED lights placed on the wall during the last exploration are not visible. Please descend the first flight and examine the landing wall. D9884 descends 13 steps and stops. No trace of the prior LED light remains. Yeah, it's just a dirty concrete wall. There's like nothing on it. No, wait. It's a little bit sticky right here. There's a child crying down there. She's begging for help and crying. Thank you. Please continue down the steps until you notice anything unusual. D9884 descends. Audio of the crying child, consistent with prior explorations, is again picked up. She continues without incident until the 17th landing. Ew. There's something on the ground here, and it smells really bad. It's all sticky and stuck on my shoe. Ugh, it's so gross. Video feed confirms presence of a substance occupying a space approximately 50 centimeters in diameter. Can you describe the scent? It kinda smells like old rusty metal and pee. Thank you. Please continue until you notice anything else. 9884 continues to the 51st landing without incident. Similar observations are made. Subject continues her descent until the 89th landing is reached. The video feed jerks and the subject yells. Ah, fuck! There's a hole in the ground and I almost fell in! Video feed confirms the presence of a hole approximately 1 meter in diameter. The subject shines the floodlight down, revealing only blackness. Approximately 4 seconds pass, and a light of indeterminate distance down the hole flicks on for approximately 2 seconds, and then back off. D9884. There was a light down there. It's gone now, but it was on for like a second. Did you see it? Yes. Can you estimate the depth of this hole? D9884. No way. It's too deep. At least a kilometer. Like, way more than a kilometer. Thank you. Can you still hear the sounds of the child? D9884. Uh-huh. She still sounds far away. It's like, for every step I take, she takes one down. Please continue down until you encounter anything unusual. D9884 continues to descend for approximately an hour, covering an additional 164 flights. She stops to rest on the 253rd landing, consuming a nutrient bar and water. She is at an estimated 1.1 kilometers below the initial landing, yet the sound of the child has not changed in volume. After 4 minutes, she resumes her descent, making no stops for another 216 flights. D9884 is on the 469th landing. D9884. I'm not getting anywhere. I think it's time I went back. I mean, going down is one thing, but this is a long climb back. You have been provided with food, water, and blankets to last you 24 hours. Please continue down. D9884. No. I think I'm gonna go back up. D9884 turns toward the previous flight of stairs. D9884. Screams. SCP-087-1, the face, is directly behind D9884, blocking her ascent. The face appears approximately 30 centimeters from the lens of the camera. Its eyes are fixed directly on the lens, this time looking not at the subject, but the person viewing the video feed. The feed glitches and freezes for 4 seconds, accompanied by a static-like screeching noise. It then cuts to bumpy visuals of D9884 descending the stairs rapidly. D9884. It's been following me. This whole time. It's been right behind me. Oh God, it's right behind me. It was looking right at me. Please do something. Please help me. Oh God, no. Please, get it away. Please, no. Please. I knew it was following me. Help, make it leave. Please, no. It was looking at me. It was staring at me. It knew I was here. It's been watching me this whole time. Oh God, please help me. No, please. This continues in a similar fashion until the end. D9884 continues to scream and plead hysterically as she rapidly descends the staircase. The static-like screeching overlays the audio feed, beneath which can still be heard the sound of the crying child. Approximately 14 flights down, the video feed swings behind D9884. The face is now approximately 20 centimeters from the lens, fixated on the camera, giving the illusion of eye contact with those viewing the footage. After further descent, D9884 trips and falls unconscious. 12 seconds pass. The face comes into full view of the camera, eye contact being made directly with the viewer. Audio and video feeds cut out, and no connection is re-established. You have already failed, and something is being built to replace you. Newly constructed humans are informed of the machine's existence at the moment of their creation, pre-selected for skills deemed useful to reconstruction. Falsified records of tree rings, starlight, and radioactive decay are maintained to preserve the appearance of history. The methods of that falsification are documented later in this file. The message begins with a subject already condemned. You've already failed. Those words, attributed within the file to the supervising researcher, are the first thing certain replacement individuals will ever hear upon becoming aware of themselves. The first replacement humans housed off-site must, of necessity, be informed of the anomaly's existence and function during the very process of their creation. Concealment at this stage is not attempted, as concealment would defeat the operational purpose. These newly constructed individuals are intended to participate directly in reconstruction and recolonization efforts, and to that end, certain skill sets deemed appropriate to reconstruction have been pre-selected for increased prevalence in the first 5 million individuals produced. As the global population increases, the associated process of diaspora and reconstruction is projected to accelerate geometrically, permitting economic and agricultural infrastructure to recover as rapidly as circumstances allow. The intended outcome is a populated world that appears, from within, to have never been interrupted. It is acknowledged, without emphasis, that some replacement humans may not survive the initial renovation period. Such individuals can be recreated indefinitely. The process continues, iteration after iteration, until all major population centers and all Foundation facilities have been completed to specification. During this same interval, Foundation administrative assets are directed away from field concerns and toward a quieter task: the falsification of dendrochronological, astronomical, and radiometric dating records. The purpose of this falsification is the maintenance of the appearance of historical continuity, so that the reconstructed world will not, upon examination of its trees, its skies, or its stones, betray the seam at which it was resumed. Personnel are directed for full procedural detail to the document designated 2000 Retcon, version 2.3.3. In the event that significant portions of natural habitat are also destroyed prior to the project's completion, personnel are directed instead, or additionally, to the document designated 2001 Tier, version 3.0, which enumerates approved methods for the rapid regrowth of ecosystems considered necessary to the resumed world's function. Preceding the file itself, an access notice is displayed. It warns that the document requires Level 4/2000 clearance, a designation not conferred by standard Level 4 protocol, and issued only through separate authorization channels overseen by the History and Metaphysical Containment Liaison Office and the O5 Council. Any attempt to proceed beyond the notice without such clearance is grounds for immediate termination of Foundation employment, along with the cancellation of all associated educational, medical, retirement, and mortality benefits. By submitting credentials, the reader consents to exposure to a known cognitohazardous image and affirms prior inoculation against that image. Unauthorized viewing will render the console inoperable. Security personnel will then be dispatched to revive the reader and escort them to a detention cell for interrogation. Access attempts from any terminal not connected to the Foundation intranet result in immediate termination, regardless of clearance level. Upon submission of credentials, the interface indicates that a security cognitohazard has been activated and that scans are being conducted for neural activity. After a pause, consciousness is confirmed, and the file is retrieved. A brief, unattributed line appears within the retrieval sequence, reading, "You people don't get it. And I don't think you ever will." The formal entry then begins. The item is designated SCP-2000. Its object class is Thaumiel. The special containment procedures state that the entrance to SCP-2000 is disguised as a disused park ranger station within Yellowstone National Park. Despite several civilian trespassing attempts, the entrance has not been breached at any point in the installation's recorded history, and no additional physical containment measures have been deemed necessary. Protocol Plainsight-201 is in effect for the site, governing the maintenance of its outward appearance and the discretion of surrounding activity. Necessary supplies and replacement personnel are delivered by unmarked road vehicles or civilian helicopter, as appropriate to the circumstances of the delivery. Access to documentation concerning this object is tightly stratified. No personnel below Level 4 2000 clearance are permitted to review files pertaining to the anomaly itself or to any of the protocols associated with its containment and upkeep. Descent within the structure is more restricted still. No personnel below Level 5 2000 clearance are permitted access to the facility below Sub-Level 3. All personnel assigned to the object must submit to a neural archetype scan on a monthly basis. Those stationed on site are subject to weekly scans, with the resulting records stored locally within the facility. Personnel of Level 4 2000 clearance or above who are stationed on site are not permitted to leave Yellowstone National Park during the course of their assignment. In the event of transfer, whether elective or compulsory, Class A amnestics are to be administered, and false memories implanted consistent with assignment to other high-security or Keter-class objects. Additional personnel may be assigned to the facility and granted temporary Level 4 2000 clearance at the discretion of the item's HMCL supervisor and O5 command. The exterior surface of the containment structure is surrounded by Scranton reality anchors, installed every 20 meters in a hexagonal arrangement. Their function is to prevent incursion by hostile anomalous interference. Each anchor is inspected semi-annually and replaced as necessary. Technicians servicing these components are directed to reference the current revision of the relevant service document. In addition, 5 Xianx/Anastasicos constant temporal sinks, capable of maintaining a stable tachyon flux across the expanse of the facility at a maximum output rating of 100 watts each, have been installed within the site. These devices are subject to monthly maintenance, with technicians consulting the appropriate reference document for procedure. The unresolved matter raised at the outset, namely, why so ordinary a landscape should require so extraordinary a perimeter, begins to answer itself here. The facility is not merely hidden. It is anchored, insulated, and shielded against interference from directions that conventional security cannot address. Within the maintenance regime, one pseudo-Riemannian manifold has been initiated at the entrance to Sub-Level 4. This manifold must remain open at all times. Should the manifold fail, procedure Dead Euclid 101 is to be executed immediately. Other non-anomalous life support and utility systems may be maintained in accordance with Standard Foundation Maintenance Protocol, Section 101.5, pertaining to mission-critical components. Wherever possible, non-anomalous materials and resources are to be used for the object's maintenance and repair, preserving the anomalous inventory for the singular function the object exists to perform. In the event of any K-class scenario, which does not compromise the existence or function of the object, procedure CYA-009 is to be enacted as soon as possible. Remaining Foundation installations globally are to monitor the scenario as it unfolds, preserving what material resources are possible under the Ganymede Protocol, until such time as all remaining sites respond, quote, all clear, unquote, to queries issued as defined in document 2000 XKAC 1.9. Upon receipt of the all clear code, procedure Lazarus 01 is to be implemented. Appended to the file is a note from former Administrator Dr. William Fritz, preserved on permanent record at his explicit instruction. It reads as follows: I want this on permanent record, and I don't rightly care if you think it's an insult to your intelligence. Some things are just this important. This device is absolutely not an excuse to let down our guard or take greater risks with SCP objects, or cross-test them, or whatever you might have in mind. Primary containment is still our best chance at survival. Otherwise, there would be no reason to make the cover-up so extensive. We can only suspend God's disbelief so many times before the universe just says no. And considering what we've had to deal with in these past few decades, we may have passed that point already. The note is unsigned beyond his name and stands without further commentary in the master file. Description: SCP-2000 is a subterranean Foundation installation, originally constructed sometime in the last redacted years, for the purpose of reconstructing civilization in the event that a K-class end-of-the-world scenario could not be averted in time to prevent humanity's extinction or near extinction. Since its inception, SCP-2000 has been activated at least twice. Foundation records regarding SCP-2000's construction and history prior to this assumed first use have been lost. Whether this information blackout is the result of accident or design is impossible to determine. The mission-critical portion of the installation begins 75 meters below ground level and extends to a depth of 100 meters. Although the scope of engineering required to recreate SCP-2000 in its entirety is impossible to execute while maintaining secrecy, all subsystems of the installation have been successfully reproduced in a laboratory setting. The installation itself, and all procedures involved in its upkeep, are mundane in nature. Information regarding the esoteric Foundation technologies necessary for the installation's function is filed separately under Document 2000 SSEX and is not considered within the scope of the present summary. Primary power for the facility is provided by a liquid fluoride thorium reactor, rated for 1 gigawatt of total output, with a reactor life of 70 years at maximum capacity. A geothermal generator has also been installed, taking advantage of the region's volcanic activity. This secondary generator is capable of powering the facility in a designated standby mode indefinitely, allowing the installation to remain dormant across intervals of unknown length without external support or attention. SCP-2000 further contains water treatment facilities, air purification and recycling systems, and hydroponic production wings sufficient to meet internal demand under prolonged isolation. Housing has been provided in quantities necessary to permanently sustain up to 10,000 personnel. The purpose of these 10,000 berths, and the criteria by which their eventual occupants are to be selected, is addressed in later sections of the master file. Central to the primary function of the installation is a subsystem designated the Bright/Zarshian Hominid Replicator, of which 500,000 individual units are integrated into the facility. At peak operational capacity, and following a warm-up period of 5 days, this array is rated to produce 100,000 viable, non-anomalous human specimens per day. Raw biological material is drawn from surrounding hot springs and underground magma flows by way of an underground Riemannian transit pipe. Genetic sequencing is provided by a computer memory bank containing records of all known human alleles. In principle, the system is capable of reconstructing any lost human genome, or generating an arbitrary number of novel and unique genomes in quantities sufficient to repopulate human civilization. An attached researcher note attributed to Dr. Christopher Zarshian of Biotech Research and Development qualifies the current status of the array. Use of the replicator system is at present suspended outside of maintenance testing and emergency situations, though the Standing Contingency Directive remains active. A possible hostile incursion is still under investigation, and the associated database is described as particularly difficult to debug. Observed distributions of congenital and genetic defects remain significantly above baseline. Current guaranteed viability in new specimens is estimated at between 60 and 75%. Appended to this note, in the researcher's own hand, is a single further remark. You can't bring them back. Humans produced through this process may be advanced to any desired chronological age without extending the 5-day incubation period. Beyond the physical construction of the specimen, the replicator system is additionally capable of implanting memory content through the administration of Class G hallucinogenics and developmental hypnotherapy. To this end, life histories, neural archetype scans, and complete genomes of numerous Foundation personnel are maintained on file. This archive includes all personnel holding Level 4/2000 clearance and above. The stated intent of this redundancy is to ensure that the installation may be activated and the associated recovery procedure initiated by as few as one surviving human operator. Activation of the installation is gated by the implementation of the so-called Ganymede protocol, an internal designation indicating that the Foundation has failed to prevent a class-ending scenario. Upon such implementation, the security systems governing the installation will unlock, permitting any Foundation employee to initiate the associated recovery procedure. Should the installation remain inactive for a period of 20 years following this unlocking, its security posture will be relaxed further still, at which point any non-anomalous human being may access the facility and initiate the procedure without credential. Once the procedure is activated, the installation's internal monitoring systems will attempt to locate all personnel holding the appropriate clearance and to assess their present condition. Mission-critical personnel who cannot be located by these internal systems will be replicated from the most recent neural archetype scan retained on file. These replicated personnel are awakened prior to the initialization of any other system within the facility, ensuring that qualified operators are present before broader functions come online. Did you catch that? Following the revival of these personnel, the installation's security locks will resume their normal function, and unrestricted access will lapse. A complete enumeration of the contingency options available under the procedure is retained in a corresponding document, access to which is restricted to personnel of the highest clearance tier associated with the installation. Operators are further reminded that receipt of the designated All Clear code, as defined in the applicable authentication document, may be waived only in the event that all other Foundation facilities have been rendered inoperative. In any other circumstance, the All Clear must be received before ordinary operations resume. In the absence of such a waiver, security and mobile task force elements revived under the procedure will be dispatched to all remaining Foundation facilities, where they will confirm the continued function of those sites and the integrity of local reality in and around them. Only upon verification of both conditions is the recovery process considered to have progressed beyond its initial phase. Procedure Lazarus 01 commences when an authorized Level 5/2000 employee inputs the desired resume date into the BZHR control unit housed within the object. Upon receipt of this input, the available units within the installation begin the production of prominent political and cultural leaders appropriate to the selected time period, drawing upon descriptions and genetic information held on file. Concurrent with the generation of these individuals, a broader global populace consistent with the chosen period is replicated to whatever scale the procedure requires. The greater portion of the installation's floor space is dedicated not to biological production, but to storage. Building materials, construction equipment, factory machinery, agricultural equipment, and extensive computer database storage occupy the majority of available volume. Alongside these infrastructural provisions, a substantial cultural repository is maintained on site, containing copies of thousands of famous works of art, music, and literature, together with a full backup of the World Wide Web. This redundancy is considered essential in the event that other repositories have been destroyed prior to or during the triggering event. Appended to the records of a previous iteration of Lazarus 01, discovered upon its conclusion, is a note preserved here in its original form. The note, entered by a Foundation historian, advises that if the procedure must ever be conducted again, the resume date should not be set further back than 20 years before the event. The rationale offered is twofold. First, that a nearer resume date permits the process to piggyback upon a considerable quantity of undestroyed structures already present in the world. Second, that a nearer resume date renders the resumption of historical continuity substantially easier to manage. The historian further observes that a greater interval places undue strain upon personnel, who must otherwise rebuild to chronological specifications solely to accommodate the demands of population and agriculture. The note concludes with a question regarding how much of the 20th and subsequent centuries the Foundation truly wishes to rewrite, and how many times, before noting that one Great War is difficult enough to keep track of. A subsequent annotation confirms that the requesting historian's tenure will honor this request, with official documentation to follow. 2 world wars, it concludes, are plenty. Projections indicate that world population, manufacturing capability, agricultural output, and culture can be restored to conditions comparable to those of the year 2000 Common Era within a window of 25 to 50 years following implementation of the procedure. At the conclusion of procedure Lazarus 01, the amnestic agent designated ENUI-5 will be released en masse. This dispersal will cause all reconstructed humans to forget any affiliation with Foundation assets or personnel. History, from that point forward, will resume from the chosen date. It is acknowledged within the documentation that each iteration of the procedure will necessarily alter the course of human events, owing to the enormous complexity of human social interaction. Further research into predictive historical modeling, based on observations gathered from prior completions of procedure Lazarus 01, remains ongoing. A note from the Hazardous Materials and Containment Liaison follows. No further proposals for behavioral or cultural modification will be accepted at this time. Previous attempts to ameliorate violent and sociopathic tendencies in humanity as a whole have already been implemented and are deemed successful. Experimentation using second iteration subjects indicates that any additional modification would undermine tenacity to such a degree that technological and social progress would be noticeably inhibited. Reference is made to a redacted experiment log for further information. The note is attributed to the Hazardous Materials and Containment Liaison Supervisor. What follows in the file is designated Document 2000 SSEX. It establishes the basic operational parameters of technology developed specifically for the SCP-2000 project. The document offers a single caveat before its technical disclosures begin. Although the technology described may, at first review, appear to be anomalous in nature, it is in fact based entirely on verifiable scientific principles already in use by the Foundation to effect containment elsewhere. The distinction, the file implies, is significant. The machinery within the facility is not itself an anomaly. It is only the scale of its intended application and the condition of the world it is designed to answer that place it within the Foundation's purview. The supporting technologies deserve individual attention. The Scranton Reality Anchor predates the first activation of the installation itself, credited to its namesake in the late 19th century. Its housing and internal circuitry are constructed from a corrosion-resistant beryllium-bronze alloy. Its design inspired by artifacts whose origin has been expunged from accessible record. The device functions by suppressing the emergence of virtual particle and antiparticle pairs required for a certain class of reality-bending phenomena to manifest. The expense of producing the necessary alloy has limited Foundation-wide deployment to units with a modest area of effect. An attached researcher note advises that the mechanism of the anchor and the source of its inspiration must be kept secret from all possible reality-bending entities, for reasons the author trusts are obvious. Only qualified maintenance technicians of the appropriate clearance are permitted access to the documentation. Should any staff member of the installation reveal such clearance, they are to be reported to Overseer Command for reassignment and amnestic therapy. The note stresses that this is not a punishment, but a legitimate safety concern. If these devices are compromised, so too is the lifeboat. A second supporting system, the Zayank Anastasakos Constant Temporal Sink, is designed to stabilize the flow of causality across a given field. Through high-power electromagnetic radiation in the radio band, coupled with a tachyon field emitter, it produces a permeable event boundary. Organic and electrical systems may pass through unaffected, while a static causal environment is maintained within. In practice, temporal anomalies that might otherwise prevent the installation from being constructed have no effect, provided at least one such device remains in operation. There are no plans for Foundation-wide implementation. An accompanying researcher note acknowledges the utility of temporal sinks for containing objects that require a single second to last hundreds of thousands of years, or for holding a point of reference constant during temporal repair. However, natural causal relationships possess a flexibility the human mind is not equipped to address. Wider implementation has been attempted in a past iteration. Further inquiries into the results of that attempt will not be accepted. The faces surface without moving their lips, yet the agent hears them clearly, each one calling out a name they should not know. They ask for help. They speak of a place. They speak of a graduating class. The nature of what waits beneath the water and why one researcher insists it be forgotten is documented later in this file. The subject, referred to in transcript only by the string, "You do not recognize the bodies in the water," continues describing the faces observed in the water. Faces, the subject states, "My friends." Faces I recognized, some I didn't, but they became more familiar as I saw them. I'd known them my whole life, but there was something wrong with them. Dr. Harrison prompts the subject to clarify. "Wrong with them?" the subject responds. "Like the face of someone you see in a dream, where you can't remember it right. There's something wrong. And the way they were speaking, Dr. Harrison interrupts. "Speaking? No, that's impossible. They're simply not..." The subject continues over the interruption. "Not moving their mouths, but I could hear them, asking for help. They told me who they were. They told me you knew who they were, that you..." Dr. Harrison again interrupts, instructing the subject to stop, and states that the subject is clearly succumbing to the cognitohazard and that medical attention is required. The doctor addresses the subject as agent and begins to issue a further instruction which is cut off. At this point in the transcript, the speaker designation shifts. Where the subject had previously been logged under a single string, the identifier now repeats, reading, "You, me." The subject's speech grows agitated. "Get your hands off of me. I know all their names, Harrison. I heard them speaking to me. Every single one. All it takes is one person to see them and tell people, and they'll know what you've been trying to hide." Kirk Lawnwood High School, class of... the subject's statement is truncated. Dr. Harrison issues the following instructions in rapid succession. Subdue them, get them out of here, take them to amnestics, and turn that goddamn recorder off. The transcript ends here. Following the end of the log, the document presents a bracketed directive addressed to the reader. The directive requests that the reader repeat a following phrase, slowly and clearly, into their terminal microphone. The phrase itself is withheld from this section of the file and appears in material to be reviewed subsequently. The phrase, disclosed at this stage of the file for the purpose of verification, is as follows. I do not recognize the bodies in the water. Personnel are instructed to repeat this phrase slowly and clearly into the terminal microphone. Upon successful recitation, the terminal returns the notation that verification is complete and that the user's cognitive resistance value is within acceptable limits. Access to further material is then permitted. What follows, under the standard header, is the designation of the anomaly itself. The object is cataloged as SCP-2316. Its object class is Euclid. Special containment procedures are recorded as follows. Under no circumstances are Foundation personnel to approach SCP-2316. Observation of SCP-2316 must only be carried out by remote dummy probes utilizing video and audio recording equipment. Only those personnel adequately rated for exposure to cognitohazardous anomalies may review footage and audio of SCP-2316. The containment directive is notable for its prohibition on direct approach without qualification. No provision is made in this section for eventual retrieval, sampling, or entry by staff of any clearance level. Observation is limited to unmanned platforms, and review of the resulting footage is itself restricted to personnel whose cognitive resistance has been formally certified as sufficient for exposure to hazards of this category. Readers will note that the verification procedure described above is not merely a preface to the file, but functions as a component of ongoing containment. The instruction to repeat the phrase and the phrase itself together constitute a working element of the protective architecture surrounding SCP-2316. To read further is, by the terms of the file, to have already declared that one does not recognize the bodies in the water. With the verification satisfied, the object designation established, and the general containment posture set out, the file proceeds to a description of SCP-2316 itself, of its location, and of the events recorded there by remote instrumentation. That material is reserved for the sections that follow. Personnel who at any point during the review of this file experience unfamiliar recognition, involuntary vocalization, or the impression of having seen the subject matter previously are reminded of the standing instruction preceding this section and are advised to remain calm and to await the arrival of medical staff. Behavioral studies of SCP-2316 indicate that any attempt to come into direct contact with instances, whether by entering the waters of Lake Redacted or by making physical contact with an instance, will result in the appearance of further instances. The recovered documentation notes, at this point in the file, the recurring statement that you do not recognize the bodies in the water. The additional instances do not act physically upon the affected individual. Their function, as inferred from recovered incident reports, is to reinforce and to add to the strength of the associated cognitohazard, thereby compelling the affected individual into the lake. A marginal annotation of uncertain origin and presented within the file itself poses the question of how one could fail to recognize the bodies in the water. Individuals who enter the lake under the influence of this compulsion are considered lost. To date, none have been recovered. Appended to the main document is Addendum 2316.1, designated as an interview. The introductory portion of this addendum has been marked as Data Expunged. Interposed within the expunged section, and again of uncertain origin, is the statement that they do not wish to show you, but that the annotator will, and that the relevant material lies below. This is followed by a verification error indicating an unrecognized user, a request to log in, and a sequence of corrupted characters interrupting the prompt. Within the corrupted string, the phrase, "Let me show you their faces," is legible. The log then begins. The interviewing officer is identified as Dr. Harrison. The interview subject is designated within the transcript by a single, unbroken string reading, "You do not recognize the bodies in the water." Dr. Harrison asks whether the subject ever felt compelled to enter the water, as though something were pulling the subject in. The subject responds, "What? No, of course not. There is nothing wrong with them. They did not drag me in. I saw them in the water and went in myself. I needed to see them. I wanted to hear what they were saying. They are my friends." Dr. Harrison then asks what the subject saw upon entering the water. Appended to this question, within the transcript itself, is the recurring statement that "you do not recognize the bodies in the water." The statement does not appear only once. It is repeated in the transcript, and in its repetition, it inverts. The record preserves both forms in sequence, presented without editorial mediation. The first reads, "I do not recognize the bodies in the water." The second, following immediately, reads, "I recognize the bodies in the water." The two lines are given equal weight within the document, neither corrected against the other, neither struck through. No annotation clarifies which was spoken first, or whether both were spoken at all. The contradiction is preserved as if it were itself the intended content. Following these paired statements, the transcript is interrupted by what appears to be a system message, of the kind ordinarily produced by internal Foundation terminals during credential checks. The message is marked with a failure indicator. It reads that verification is incomplete. It states that the user's credential rating value is not within acceptable limits. It states that the user's credential rating value is being influenced by active cognitohazards. It then instructs the user to please stay still and advises that a member of the user's site's medical staff will be with them shortly. The final portion of this instruction does not resolve cleanly. Partway through the phrase referring to medical staff, the text degrades. A run of characters follows in which punctuation, numerals, and slashes are interleaved with fragments of the preceding words. The corruption is confined to the terminal message and does not spread backward into the earlier transcript. Whether the degradation reflects a genuine failure of the recording apparatus, an artifact of the anomaly, or an intentional element of the document itself is not addressed within the excerpt. The entry then concludes with a single bracketed notation, set apart from the surrounding text. It reads, "Terminal lockout." No further transcript follows. No response from the subject is recorded. No indication is given as to whether medical staff attended, whether the lockout was resolved, or whether the session simply ended at this point. The excerpt terminates on the notation, and the reader is left with the paired contradictory statements, the failed verification, the corrupted instruction to remain still, and the closure of the terminal, presented in that order and without further commentary from the compiling authority. The second addendum opens with a header that repeats the word "below" in an unbroken chain, marked internally as an invalid entry. Beneath this header, the file transitions into a collapsible block whose visible label has degraded into partial terminal formatting characters, and whose contents no longer present as a Foundation document, but as a direct address, unsigned, framed within nested brackets. The address begins with an assertion that the reader does not have a lot of time and will need to get away quickly. It instructs the reader to go back to the lake, to enter the water, and to look into their eyes. It identifies the eyes as belonging to the reader's friends and classmates. It refers to a trip taken to the lake in the fall of 1975, undertaken together when the reader was young, and asks whether the reader remembers. It repeats the instruction to look into their eyes. It states that the reader can hear them speaking in the same manner they once spoke to the author of the address. It cautions the reader not to accept the framing that the experience is merely a cognitohazard. It attributes fault to the figures in the lake, insisting that they caused this and that all involved were innocent children. It states that the reader and the author alone escaped, and that the remainder are at the bottom of the lake, waiting for the two of them to return and be whole together again. It states that they want the reader to know, and that they want the reader to remember. It commands the reader to wake up, to remember the fall of 1975, described as the year they were supposed to graduate, and not to allow them to induce forgetting. It asks whether the reader can hear them calling. The question, "Can't you hear them?" then repeats across the block in descending and ascending clusters, separated by blank paragraph markers. Interspersed within these repetitions are the instructions, "Look into their eyes," and the affirmation, "I know you can." Further along, the block states that they are waiting for the reader. Later still, in isolation, appears the fragment, "We were there with them." The block closes with a final instruction, "Go back to the lake." What remains of the file, following the closing instruction, is administrative in nature. The document terminates its narrative content and yields to the residual matter appended to any Foundation record of this kind. There is no further transcript, no additional recovered fragment, no supplementary interview. The reader is left at the shore of the lake, or rather at the instruction to return there, without further guidance from the containing document itself. The file registers its position within the broader catalog by acknowledging the entries immediately adjacent to it. The preceding entry and the succeeding entry are noted in sequence, flanking this record without commentary. No cross-reference is drawn between them and the anomaly documented here. Their inclusion is procedural, a matter of indexing, and the file offers no indication that the neighboring anomalies bear any relation to the events described in the foregoing sections. The remainder of the file consists of attribution. 3 image assets are listed by file name. The first is designated warning, the second is designated as a further warning image, and the third is designated header. Each is attributed to the same author, and each is released under the same permissive license, with the source given as the Foundation Wiki. These images accompany the record in its original presentation and are noted here for the sake of completeness. The third of these images is further described as a derivative work. Its underlying source is identified as a photograph of a foggy island drawn from a public repository of freely licensed imagery. The photograph is credited to its original author and released under a license permitting unrestricted reuse. A link to the source is provided in the record. With this, the file concludes. The anomaly it documents remains at the point last described. The instruction to return to the lake stands as the final directive within the narrative body of the document. Beyond that instruction, the record offers only its own scaffolding, the quiet apparatus of citation and index by which such files are held in place within the wider archive. The reader is returned to the shore, and the document, having discharged its function, falls silent. What follows in the archive is another file, and after that, another, each holding its own contained thing at its own contained distance. What remains of the source at this point is not narrative, but the substrate beneath it. The archive, examined closely, reveals its own scaffolding, fragments of formatting instruction, presentational residue, the quiet machinery by which a file is made legible to those cleared to read it. These are not, properly speaking, part of the anomaly. They are the shelving on which the anomaly rests. The reviewer is advised to disregard them, as one disregards the hum of ventilation while attending to the words of a witness. And yet a certain discipline of attention will note that even the shelving has been arranged. Superscript is set to hover slightly above its line. A cut color is defined, pale and nearly white. A bar color is defined, a deep and settled red. Translation blocks are marked as not to be displayed. Info containers are given their link colors, their line heights, their folded and unfolded states. Where a reader might expect a control to expand or collapse the record, the control is rendered transparent, its function preserved, but its surface effaced. In its place, drawn in white against the underlying field, a single word is set to appear, in a weight approaching the heaviest available, in a family of typefaces beginning with one and falling back through several others until something legible is found. The word is a name, or the semblance of a name, and it is the signature by which this file is marked as belonging to a particular hand within the archive. The reader is not expected to interact with this signature. It is not a link. It cannot be followed. It sits at the corner of the containment record as a mason's mark sits at the corner of a wall, indicating authorship without inviting response. Its presence is noted here only for completeness, so that no element of the document, however peripheral, is left unaccounted for. Beyond this point, the file terminates. The remaining space is given over to separators, blank and uniform, holding the page open against what would otherwise close it. The object designated within has been described. The interview conducted in its vicinity has been transcribed. The apparatus of presentation has been noted. The record, in its entirety, is now available for review. Attention now returns to the containment procedures governing the anomaly. The lake in which the object is located has been quarantined and fenced off. It is to be routinely patrolled by individuals who have not been exposed to the object and who possess no prior knowledge of its characteristics. You do not recognize the bodies in the water. Individuals who attempt to bypass the enforced quarantine are to be apprehended and transported to Site 33 for a full cognitive influence screening. Individuals who come within 50 meters of the lake containing the object are to be considered lost. A prompt is inserted at this juncture in the document. The reader is instructed as follows. Please repeat the following phrase slowly and clearly into your terminal microphone. I do not recognize the bodies in the water. A subsequent notation indicates that verification is complete and that the user is within acceptable limits. The description of the object then commences. The designation refers to an anomalous phenomenon existing within a lake, the specific name of which is redacted, in a county whose name is likewise redacted, within a state whose name is redacted. The object manifests as a group of human corpses floating in a small group at the surface of the water. A parenthetical note observes that, due to the nature of the object, it is uncertain how many individual corpses exist within the group. The number is currently estimated at 45, but has been estimated as high as 200 or more. The identities of these corpses are, in the original entry, marked as removed due to cognitohazard. An automated change has replaced this notation with the single word, unknown. DNA testing, the record notes, has been inconclusive. The reader will observe that the containment instruction and the description of the object are interrupted by the same declarative sentence. The sentence appears once within the containment procedures and is presented again as a phrase to be spoken aloud into a terminal microphone. Its recurrence is not annotated. It is not framed as commentary. It appears within the file as though it were simply another line of standard protocol, indistinguishable in tone from the surrounding clinical text. Analysis of the anomaly continues with a shift from behavioral observation to speculative theory concerning its underlying structure. While SCP-2316 appears to consist of individual instances, it is theorized that SCP-2316 may instead be an entity composed of a collective consciousness. The distinction is significant. Individual instances of SCP-2316 do not act on their own, but do seem to be able to act collectively as a single unit. At this point in the document, the clinical description is interrupted by an inserted annotation, presented in the same marginal format observed in prior sections. The annotation reads as follows. I know who they are. I know their names, each and every one of them. Don't you? The underlying text then attempts to enumerate the individual instances. The list begins, but is not permitted to conclude. The document reads that the individual instances of SCP-2316 are followed by a partial sequence of designations that is truncated by an automated redaction notice indicating that a cognitohazard has been removed. A secondary automated message follows, stating that further editing of this passage is locked. The sentence resumes on the far side of the redaction with the observation that the instances are unrecognizable and that the reader does not recognize the bodies in the water. The file then addresses the mechanism by which recognition is nonetheless reported by observers. SCP-2316 hosts a powerful cognitohazardous effect. This effect acts upon those who have viewed SCP-2316, those who are aware of certain parts of its nature, or those who were enrolled in a program whose designation has again been struck from the record by cognitohazard removal, with the automated system marking the reference as invalid. The effect causes such individuals to believe that the individual instances of SCP-2316 are human beings they recognize, typically from their childhood. A final annotation is appended to this passage. It reads as follows: "They're lying. They know damn well who they are. The cognitohazard is real, but it's just their way of crying for help, of letting people know who they are, who they were." The document terminates at this line. No further clinical text follows the annotation. The file, as archived, ends here. It begins in the corner of the eye. After sufficient exposure, the subject glimpses a figure at the edge of vision, or reflected in glass. Continued exposure renders these visualizations permanent. The figure has been observed attempting to communicate with those it haunts, though the nature of these gestures, documented later in this file, remains uncomprehended. Once an individual has accumulated more than 90 hours of exposure to the continuous images produced by the anomaly, that individual will begin to briefly perceive the entity designated SCP-1471-A within the edges of their peripheral vision, within reflective surfaces, or within some combination of the two. These initial visualizations are described as fleeting and inconsistent, occurring without apparent pattern in the subject's immediate environment. Continued exposure beyond this 90-hour threshold results in irreversible and sustained visualizations of SCP-1471-A. The entity, once perceived at this stage, does not recede or dissipate and remains a persistent presence in the subject's field of view. Subjects who have reached this later stage of exposure have reported periodic attempts by SCP-1471-A to visually communicate with them. The precise nature of these attempts has not been established. Affected individuals have consistently failed to understand or comprehend the actions performed by the entity, and no coherent interpretation of these communications has been documented. At present, the only known treatment capable of reversing the effects induced by the anomaly is the complete elimination of the individual's visual exposure to the associated images, and this intervention must be carried out prior to the 90-hour post-installation threshold. Beyond this point, no method of reversal is known. To date, no apparent hostile activity has been reported in relation to SCP-1471-A. The entity's intentions, if any can be inferred, remain unclear, and its ongoing behavior toward affected individuals continues to be monitored under standard observational protocols. Documented behavioral patterns following installation of the application appear to progress along a consistent timeline. During the first 24 hours after installation, the affected mobile device begins to receive images taken at locations commonly frequented by the individual in possession of the device. These transmissions arrive without apparent sender information, and their content reflects familiar environments associated with the subject's routine activity. The nature of these locations suggests prior observation, though the mechanism by which such imagery is obtained has not been established. After 48 hours have elapsed from the point of installation, the character of the received images shifts. the mobile device begins to receive photographs taken at locations recently visited by the individual. These images correspond to places the subject has occupied within a narrow window preceding transmission, indicating that the source of the imagery maintains awareness of the subject's movements in near current terms, rather than relying solely on habitual patterns. After 72 hours, the progression enters its final documented stage. At this point, the affected mobile device begins to receive images of the individual in real time. Within these images, the entity designated SCP-1471-A appears in close proximity to the subject. The entity is present in the frame during the moment of capture, positioned near the individual, though the subject typically reports no direct awareness of its presence at the time the image is taken. The consistency of this escalating pattern across recorded instances has been noted, and the phenomenon remains under continued study. The following material is drawn from an archived document designated for restricted internal review. Access to the record requires the appropriate clearance, and the contents are reproduced here under those conditions. What follows is presented as the application listing observed on public distribution storefronts prior to Foundation intervention. The listing appears in the format standard to such platforms and offers no explanatory text, no publisher description, and no accompanying imagery beyond that native to the platform itself. The product is identified only by the name Mallow. Beneath the name is a version designation, given as version 1.0.0. The listing is offered at no cost to the end user. The reviews section, at the time of archival, indicated a total of 0 entries. No screenshots, no permissions summary, no developer contact information, and no supplementary documentation accompany the record as archived. The brevity of the listing is itself considered noteworthy. Products of this nature, distributed through the storefronts in question, are ordinarily required to provide substantially more information prior to public availability. The mechanism by which the listing bypassed these standard requirements has not been determined. Foundation personnel are reminded that the archival document is provided for reference only, and that installation, transmission, or reproduction of the associated application is strictly prohibited under existing containment protocols. The listing itself is understood to function as the initial vector by which affected devices acquire the anomaly, and any observed reappearance of the listing on active storefronts is to be reported through standard channels without delay. The following text is recovered from promotional material associated with the anomalous application, reproduced here as a document of interest. Its author and origin remain unverified, and its inclusion in this file is for reference only. The listing reads as follows. For recipient designation, redacted. Never settle for those awkward feelings of being alone ever again. Mal-O is an exciting and interactive experience that will keep you engaged and intrigued. The anxiety of social situations can be nerve-wracking, but after just a few hours of Mal-O, you will soon forget all about those painful emotions of disappointment. Be part of the new craze that is quickly becoming the next social substitute. Remember, the more you participate, the more Mal-O will engage you. Your experience is completely up to you. Absolutely no advertisements. Enjoy. The listing terminates with a single prompt reading, "Buy?" ? Analysis of the promotional text is ongoing. Personnel are reminded that the marketing copy addresses the reader in the second person and appears designed to exploit conditions of isolation and social discomfort. The reference to increased engagement in proportion to user participation is noted as consistent with observed behavioral patterns in affected individuals, though the mechanism by which such engagement is sustained remains outside the scope of this section. Foundation personnel are prohibited from acquiring, installing, or interacting with the application under any circumstances, and any exposure to the listing or its promotional text should be documented in the appropriate incident log without delay. Turning to matters of designation and object class, the entity is presently held under the classification of Euclid, reflecting the current understanding of its behavior and the incomplete predictability of its manifestations. Special containment procedures are as follows. All mobile devices upon which the anomalous application has been installed are to be confiscated by Foundation personnel at the earliest opportunity. Once secured, each such device is to undergo analysis, with particular attention paid to any information that may indicate the presence of additional affected devices in circulation. Contact records, distribution histories, and installation traces are of principal interest, as these may serve as leads toward locating further instances of the application in civilian possession. Following the completion of this analysis, containment proceeds through a standardized procedure. The batteries of the affected devices are to be removed, thereby eliminating the possibility of unintended activation or further transmission of the application. Each device is then to be assigned an individual sub-designation within the numbered series associated with this file, allowing for consistent tracking, cross-referencing, and inventory control across the containment record. Once designated, the devices are to be transferred to Storage Unit 91, located at Research Site 45, where they are to remain under standard secure storage conditions alongside other instances of the same anomaly. This centralized housing arrangement facilitates ongoing comparative study, while ensuring that no single device remains isolated, active, or accessible to unauthorized personnel. Under no circumstances are batteries to be reinstalled without explicit authorization from the responsible research staff. Beyond the immediate protocols governing seized units, containment extends into the broader digital environment through which the anomaly propagates. All online application stores servicing mobile devices are to be placed under continuous observation. This monitoring is to be conducted at all hours, without interruption, and is to encompass every storefront through which software may be distributed to a portable device. The purpose of this observation is to prevent any inadvertent sale, transfer, or distribution of SCP-1471 to members of the general public. Listings suspected of corresponding to the anomaly are to be flagged, cataloged, and subjected to further review by qualified personnel before any further action is authorized. Where a device is suspected of already possessing an active instance of the anomaly, containment procedures shift from passive monitoring to direct intervention. Such devices are to be targeted through the deployment of self-uploading malware, distributed remotely and without the knowledge or consent of the device holder. This software is designed to disable the affected device entirely, rendering it inoperable and preventing any further interaction between the anomaly and its user. The device is to remain in this disabled state until such time as it can be physically recovered. Recovery is to be conducted by field agents dispatched for that specific purpose. Upon seizure, the device enters standard containment procedures as previously outlined. Through this combined approach of surveillance, remote disablement, and physical retrieval, the Foundation seeks to intercept instances of the anomaly at every stage of their distribution before wider exposure to the civilian population can occur. Turning now to the technical description of the anomaly as it presents in its digital form. SCP-1471 manifests as a free application for mobile devices with a listed file size of approximately 9.8 megabytes. Within online application storefronts, it appears under the title Mal-O version 1.0.0. The naming convention, while consistent across observed instances, offers no insight into the origin, purpose, or authorship of the software. No developer is listed alongside the application. This absence is notable, as commercial and public distribution platforms typically require developer identification as a prerequisite for listing. SCP-1471 nonetheless appears on these platforms without any such attribution, and is available for download in the same manner as any conventionally approved application. The means by which SCP-1471 bypasses the application approval process remains undetermined. Standard procedure requires that submitted software undergo review before being made available for public distribution. SCP-1471 does not appear to be subjected to this review, or is capable of circumventing it entirely, allowing it to proceed directly to distribution without intermediary evaluation. In addition to its unexplained appearance within storefronts, SCP-1471 demonstrates a marked resistance to conventional software removal. Program Manager applications, including those designed to identify and uninstall unwanted or malicious software, are unable to detect, quarantine, or remove SCP-1471 from an affected device. The mechanism responsible for this persistence has not been identified, and current containment protocols, therefore, rely on interception and hardware-level intervention rather than software-based countermeasures. Following installation, the application produces no visible presence on the affected device. No icons are generated, no shortcuts appear on the home screen or within the standard application drawer. From the perspective of routine inspection, the software has effectively concealed itself, and the user is provided no ordinary means of locating, opening, or removing it through the device interface. Activity resumes through the messaging function. At intervals of approximately 3 to 6 hours, the anomaly transmits individual images to the device by means of standard text messaging. The distribution appears automated. No sender address consistent with a known contact is required for these transmissions to occur, and no user initiation has been observed to trigger them. Every image produced through this method shares a single consistent element. In each transmitted picture, the entity designated SCP-1471-A is present, occupying either the background or the foreground of the composition. The surrounding imagery varies. The presence of the entity does not. SCP-1471-A is described in recovered documentation as a large humanoid figure. Its head is noted to resemble the skull of a canid, and the figure is further characterized by the presence of long black hair. No additional physiological description is available at this level of documentation, and Foundation personnel are instructed to refrain from prolonged examination of transmitted images beyond that required for cataloging. The regularity of the transmissions, combined with the consistent framing of the entity within them, is presently regarded as the primary observable behavior of the anomaly following installation. End of session. The files return to the archive. New files are declassified weekly. Secure, contain, protect.